The main things that have been coming up in my clients recently is showing up, feeling your best. It's very hard when you have scoop and you have tournaments every day. There's a lot of opportunities to play. And you started your session and you're playing and you realize like, uh, I'm not like 100% today. I'm like 70%. I wish I would have known that and I wouldn't have started my session right now. I would have like taken a break. I would have gone for a walk. I would have had to lie down or something. And there's a few things to unpack here. Number one is that you want to have a warm up that helps you recognize ahead of time if that's how you're feeling. So a lot of guys I work with, they warm up with other players doing some hand history review. I've got some elite players who like to warm up with certain software or solvers and just go through like the quizzes, and they can tell by mimicking playing poker with like Poker Snowy or something, like, do I feel like I'm playing well, or is my mind kind of, some days it feels cloudy in there. It feels like you're not thinking as clearly as you should. And if you can become aware of that before you start to register, then you can take a rest, go outside, do something else. But the thing is, often we don't want to. Often we just want to slide into our session. We're dragging our feet that day, but we just want to get right into the session and play, because it's hard work emotionally transmuting your feelings from a state of like, oh, I don't feel that good, into like, I feel ready to play, I feel good. You got to unpack the thoughts you're having, overcome any doubts, look after yourself, give some love to yourself, do some stretching, do some yoga, do some exercise, something like that. And sometimes we don't want to do that. It's easier just to fire up tables. But what happens is when we fire up those tables, then we realize like, oh shit, I'm stuck into my session. I bought in for like whatever amount of money you're playing for. And now I'm here and I'm not at my best. It's kind of hard to get to your best in that moment. Like, how do I get myself to feeling good again when I'm not? And a lot of us have this issue where we feel like we need to play every tournament in our schedule all the time. So when we are in our session, if we have buy-ins on the table, we're kind of stuck there, right? But if you notice that you're not playing well, and this happens often, like, if you put in a marathon session the day before, you grinded a lot, and then you want to play the next day, and especially with day twos, a lot of the time, like, your body's telling you, hey, I need a break, I need a little, take it easy, but you've got a day two, so you're not going to take the day off or anything. So when this happens, it's pretty important to take it easy. You don't have to register every tournament in your schedule every single day that you play. We like to think of ourselves as machines, like, oh, I make 30% ROI. So like if I play $2,000 worth of buy-ins, I make, $600. Like, I have to play every tournament in the schedule because that's how I make money. This is kind of a fallacy. You do not play the same game every day. You're not a machine, you're a human being. Some days you play much better than other days. And when you're at a day where your ROI is like not as high and you're not playing as well, and you're kind of, you can tell, you can't focus on as many tables as usual. You're just like, your decisions feel a bit late. You're realizing things after the fact. The best thing you can do is stop registering, especially the upper end of your buy-in limit, and just see what happens. You might find that an hour later, you feel good. And then you're like, okay, let's get in this and let's, finish our schedule. Or you might think, okay, like, if I bust this day two I have, then I'm just gonna like stop registering for today and I'm just gonna play a smaller session. And we think, oh, I should be playing as many tables as I possibly can all the time because that's the most money for me. But the reality is, poker momentum is huge. And if you don't feel your best, and then you start firing up as many tables as you maximally register, and then start making errors or making poor, like slightly poor plays in your higher buy-in stuff or busting them, you're gonna compound the mistakes and feel worse because you're like, oh, I didn't know if I should play this tournament, then I played it and I busted it in like 10 hands. These kind of things, like if you're not feeling sound and then you have, errors in your play, or just like, it doesn't go your way and you kind of weren't feeling your best to begin with, it's going to be harder to take that in stride. So it's very important to kind of get out of this robotic, I'm a machine type thinking, and just listen to your body and where you're at. If you can figure out where you're at before the session, you can do everything in your power to raise your energy, raise your feeling, and come into your session playing as great as possible. And if you recognize during your session, you just tap the brakes, right? You tap the brakes, you slow things down, play a few less tables, play a few lower buy-ins, Like the world will not end if you miss the 15:30 level. The world will not end if you buy in late, and the world will not end if you skip a specific tournament on a certain day. This happens with a lot of my high buying clients that are playing like the super high roller series or something, and then they like, oh well, if I play 25Ks, I have to play every 10K that fires. But if you're not feeling good that day, why would you play a really competitive tournament with a really tough field? And even if you can afford it, even if it's in your bankroll, right? Like obviously I wouldn't probably skip the Sunday Million on a Sunday, like under any circumstances, but like would I skip other tournaments that are in the 215, 109 buy-in level that are pretty raggy if I didn't feel like I was playing well? Sure. And would I skip like a tournament on Tuesday or a Wednesday? If you're not feeling like you're playing that well, it doesn't make sense to fire your highest buy-ins. It doesn't mean like, oh, I'm no longer good enough for that tournament. A lot of times people don't want to move down because they feel like a certain kind of sense of obligation. Like it says something about where they're at in their poker career that they do fire this specific event, that this tournament is part of their schedule, right? This is, again, kind of nonsense. Like some days you feel better than other days, and you want to work with what you're getting from life. And, if you're firing a tournament because you would feel emotionally bad if you skipped it because it might make you question yourself, that's not a logical reason for making an investment, which is what you do when you play poker. You're making investment decisions. You're making an emotional decision because you don't want to feel bad about yourself, or you don't want to admit to yourself. Like there is no shame. There is nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to feel bad about if you don't feel your best on a random day. Like poker is a marathon, not a sprint. And just like it happens with athletes and UFC fighters and footballers and all this stuff, if you have a minor injury, maybe your eyes hurt, maybe your brain is overtaxed to making too many decisions, you have like a minor message from your body saying, tranquilo, give me a little rest, give me a little break. And you ignore that and you play through. It turns into a bigger issue, right? If you don't learn to heed the little calls from your body saying, hey, let's repair this. Let's go a little bit easier today. Just, rest and be ready for Wednesday. Then it ends up you've gotten to Friday, you didn't listen, and now you're like really overloaded. And you never want to get into that state where you're kind of playing like, zombified poker, just firing everything, playing everything, but playing really uninspired. I don't know if anyone has been in that state before, but I think it's quite common to feel like uninspired when you're playing and you're just kind of going through the motions. You're writing everything that you're bankrolled for. You're playing pretty average. You feel like you're playing okay, but you may be playing okay. In hindsight, you may realize you weren't playing as okay as you thought you were. And it takes the more time you spend playing poker from an uninspired state, the more you kind of start to see poker in an uninspired way, and it starts to become routine for you, and you train yourself to play your B game or your C game or your B minus game, and you train yourself to play your autopilot game. So the more you can stay in touch with yourself, see how you feel, how are you showing up for your morning, how are you showing up for your breakfast, how are you showing up for your morning walk outside or your yoga or your morning hit routine or whatever it is you do to move your body and feel good. How do you show up for your meditation? How do you show up for 2 pages of reading in the morning? How do you show up for your hand history review? How do you feel? And if you recognize, hey, I feel like shit, that's okay. That's great that you can admit that to yourself. And okay, I feel like shit right now. I'm going to do something about it and feel significantly less shit before I start my session, because I know that if I carry this energy and this feeling into my session, I may find that I regret that.